Hello, my name is Jasmine Young, and this is my presentation titled The Necessities and Successes of Faith-Based Shelters. This presentation is based on my Capstone 2 paper titled Faith-Based Homeless Shelters and the Case for Their Success, a resource for homeless shelter staff and volunteers. I have chosen to research this topic based on my own experience with a homeless shelter in the Phoenix area called Maggie's Place. My experience in one of the homes has made me question what triumphs and challenges faith-based shelters face regularly, and so I will explore that in my presentation. Here is a comprehensive list of the sources that I have used in both the paper that I have used to create this presentation and also the presentation itself. These articles help provide a fuller picture of what works and what does not work within faith-based homeless shelters. If you are also interested in this topic, I encourage you to read these sources and others. I am interested in faith-based homeless shelters because they are a solution to help combat a great problem that's facing the globe, and that is homelessness. Homelessness is an issue that affects a variety of people, which includes but is not limited to children, seniors, families, women, veterans, and minorities. Initially, men made up the bulk of the homeless population, but that has changed over the course of the past few decades. A multitude of issues lead to homelessness, and that has led to a change in public opinion regarding those who are without homes. So that brings me back to what I started this slide by saying, and that was that faith-based shelters were a way to combat the problem of homelessness. In the rest of this presentation, we will look further into how that is and what that looks like. But before I get into any more of that, I must talk about faith-based organizations, because faith-based organizations are what encapsulate programs such as faith-based shelters. Faith-based organizations, or FBOs, focus on helping to improve the quality of life for others. FBOs can be compared to secular organizations which also have similar goals, but the secular organizations do not have principles necessarily based in religious or spiritual messages. Unfortunately, in some cases, faith-based organizations are not as capable of providing services as secular organizations are. However, this is not the case for all FBOs, and specifically is seen among faith-integrated FBOs, which I will discuss. Typically, FBOs as a whole are seen as comparable to the services that secular organizations provide. Now that I've made a comparison between faith-based organizations and secular organizations, I will return to focusing back on FBOs and why they are significant and what their mission is. As you might have guessed, FBOs are focused on carrying out the message of a religion or spiritual nature. In order to do this, FBOs have to look at the world around them and see what needs need to be met. This can be done on a community scale, on a national scale, or even on a global scale, depending on the type of FBO. The strengths and capabilities of FBOs are based on the support that they receive from people and from finances. This support can come in a multitude of ways. It can come from the actual community of faith, the local community, and the government. Both the faith and local community can help provide volunteers, which can help the bottom line of an FBO. Having volunteers is important as less money will have to be put into hiring those who can provide services for the FBO, and more of the finances can be directed towards helping the community. Also, volunteerism allows people to gain experience or to have a positive impact on the community, which is an intrinsic reward. The faith and local community can also provide financial support in the form of donations, but a very significant form of help comes from the government. In the United States specifically, the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives and the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act are important in helping faith-based organizations thrive. Having the support of an office in the White House is incredible because that means there can be advocacy done on behalf of FBOs. And having a law such as the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act helps to promote faith-based organizations as well. This act is significant because it allows the government to fund faith-based organizations and also allows faith-based organizations to practice discrimination in hiring. Typically, discrimination is a negative, but in this case, it makes sense. You may be asking yourself why that is. However, if a faith-based organization has a particular goal in mind and with the faith in mind, it makes sense to hire those individuals that are like-minded and also seek to help the faith-based organization reach its goals and respect its ideals. Now that I've touched on the differences between faith-based organizations and secular organizations and have also given a full picture of faith-based organizations as a whole, I will discuss the differences between faith-based organizations. There are 4 different types of faith-based organizations that I will cover, one being faith-segmented, another being faith-integrated, another being grassroots religious groups, and the final one being mega charities. The first 2, faith-segmented and faith-integrated, differ in the way that they approach the message of the faith-based organization. For faith-segmented FBOs, there is less emphasis placed on spreading the message of the faith, while faith-integrated FBOs make a point of making the teachings of the faith prevalent in their services. Now I will discuss grassroots religious groups and mega charities. Grassroots religious groups differ from mega charities based on the financial support they receive and on the scale they operate on. Grassroots religious groups operate on a small scale and do not receive a great deal of financial support, while mega charities, on the other hand, do operate on a large scale and receive a great deal of financial support. Now that I've discussed faith-based organizations, I will focus on one in particular, and that is the faith-based shelter. When talking about faith-based shelters, it is important to discuss the strengths and weaknesses, but at first I will discuss the strengths of faith-based shelters. One very important strength is the capacity with which faith-based shelters can help others. Support in a faith-based shelter is both physical and emotional. The physical support being a place to sleep, and the emotional being the support that a person seeking shelter can receive from staff and volunteers. Physical and emotional support are important for those seeking shelter as they are in a very difficult period of time and are quite vulnerable. So having both these forms of support is instrumental in their ability to regain control over their lives. Another significant strength of faith-based shelters is the ability to help prevent incarceration. Individuals experiencing homelessness are likely to be arrested because they have no place to stay, and faith-based shelters help to prevent the arrests of those facing homelessness by providing a place to stay. The strengths that are associated with faith-based homeless shelters are very substantial, but there are a great deal of weaknesses that need to be discussed, and that may seem discouraging, but it actually is not. In fact, recognizing the weaknesses of faith-based shelters can help to overcome those weaknesses. Understanding where improvements need to be made is important in helping make sure that those improvements are made. These areas which need improvement can be turned into strengths, but it is necessary to explore the weaknesses in order to find solutions that will help remedy them. The first weakness of a faith-based shelter that I will discuss is the controlling nature that is associated with the shelter environment. Shelters can interfere on a person's behalf by trying to make sure they look a certain way and behave a certain way. For people that are already vulnerable, this can come as a rude shock. Not feeling as though one could be themselves where they stay robs a certain amount of freedom from an individual. And that's why the controlling within a faith-based shelter is significant, because it can impact the way that an individual expresses their identity. It's important for people to be able to show their true selves, and having intervention that interferes with that expression is not ideal. The control of interactions and visitation is also detrimental to those that are experiencing homelessness. Again, this becomes an issue of freedom when people are not allowed to meet with others when they'd like to. There are reasons for this in the sense that sometimes individuals that are experiencing homelessness may have negative influences, but It is important to not discredit all of the influences in a person's life and to recognize those that are positive and important. Having a lack of a sense of control in an already difficult time is incredibly damaging to those facing homelessness, and less restrictive measures must be put in place to make sure that individuals can feel at home where they're staying. Another issue with faith-based shelters is that too many services may be provided. While some individuals may need a great deal of attention, others may not and may receive services that they do not deem important to their rehabilitation or ability to go back into society and stand on their own 2 feet. Individuals have different needs, and while some may need a great deal of attention, others may not, and this must be reflected in the way that care is provided to individuals facing homelessness. There should not be a one-size-fits-all approach to providing services for individuals. There are certain services that could benefit everyone, such as therapy, but the therapy itself needs to be relevant to a person's life. Another issue facing faith-based shelters is the lack of privacy that is there. Again, with homelessness being an incredibly vulnerable situation to be in, having less privacy is difficult, especially when an individual is used to having more privacy than they currently have due to their homelessness. People do need time to themselves to regroup, and this must be taken into account when providing services to those that are in faith-based shelters. Free time can be an important way for an individual experiencing homelessness to feel revitalized and renewed, which is important in allowing individuals to be independent, which is a skill that is necessary to develop in order to no longer be homeless. A lack of funding is also a weakness that faith-based shelters face. Unfortunately, services are costly and necessary in order to help individuals achieve goals that they may have and goals that are necessary to reach in order to achieve independence. Impermanence is also an issue that is related to faith-based shelters. Usually, stays in faith-based shelters are limited, which does not necessarily allow a person to have enough time to be prepared to go out into the world. This is problematic because when a person decides to be independent, they should be able to do so without returning to the situation of homelessness that they are trying to overcome in the first place. Fortunately, there are a great deal of solutions that could be put into action that can help ameliorate some of the issues that faith-based shelters experience. One important solution being inexpensive housing. In order to get individuals to transition and be able to be independent, it is important that they be able to afford housing for themselves. Action must be taken in order to make housing more affordable for those who are just starting out on their own, because housing is quite an investment and is currently quite expensive as it stands, with deposits and rent that have to be made initially before moving in. So making inexpensive housing a priority could really help be a great solution to help those transition from experiencing homelessness to wanting a home of their own. Another solution would be more funding for smaller faith-based shelters. This may not be a realistic solution, but it is one that is quite important. Having financial support, especially for smaller faith-based shelters, is necessary because they address the needs of the local community and need help in order to do so. Smaller faith-based shelters need to be afforded more attention in order for them to reach more people and receive more financial support as a result of that exposure. More funding could potentially come in support of a lawful nature as well, but a great deal needs to be done in order to help fund smaller faith-based shelters. This is especially true as they may be the only resource for some individuals based on geography, and having more funding can help provide more adequate services for those experiencing homelessness. Another great way to improve homeless shelters, especially faith-based homeless shelters, would be to receive the input of those who are homeless. People that live inside the shelter can help provide a perspective on how policies work or do not work within the shelter, allowing individuals to express their opinions and know that those opinions will be put to action by helping make positive changes in a faith-based shelter can help make an individual feel more at home in the shelter. And having security and a validated opinion can help to feel appreciated and raise self-esteem, which is significant for a person experiencing homelessness, as it is a time where one's self-esteem can take a great deal of damage. Having input from homeless individuals can help the staff better serve those who are in need and be aware of problems that they might have otherwise overlooked if not having received the input of those who live in the shelter. Another solution would be to use the outside support system and provide resources to those that are experiencing homeless when they transition out of the shelter. The outside support system of a homeless individual is one that stays with them beyond their stay in the shelter. While some may not have a support system such as this, others may, and it is important to provide those that offer support to the homeless individual with the necessary tools to help encourage them to be successful and to be independent. Communication between the outside support system and the support system that a homeless individual receives while they're staying in a shelter can help strengthen both support systems. Empowering an outside support system with the information they need to know in order to help the homeless individual can help that outside support system be truly helpful. The outside support system is incredibly crucial for a person that is experiencing homelessness because that support system will always be there compared to the support system that a person receives while in a shelter, which is temporary most of the time. Although support in the shelter is temporary, it can extend through the information that is provided to the outside support system, and having continuity between what a person is told in and out of the shelter is important for an individual's success. Ideally, the shelter staff would be a great resource to come back to, but in the event that it is not possible to do so due to funding or other reasons, having the outside support system learn how to be a great support for the homeless individual can help the person transition. Another solution in faith-based shelters would be to have less differentiation between staff and homeless or among the homeless. These distinctions can lead to mistreatment, and there is no place for mistreatment in a homeless shelter, as it is meant to be a safe space. And now we come to the conclusion of my presentation, which will feature an overview. All in all, faith-based organizations, or FBOs, particularly faith-based shelters, are important in helping provide housing for those seeking shelter. As flawed as FBOs may be, and as flawed as faith-based shelters may be, the goal of each is to improve the quality of life of those who seek assistance. Flaws do not undermine the good work that has been done by FBOs and faith-based shelters specifically. Even with the flaws that FBOs have and faith-based shelters specifically may have, there are strengths that make the efforts of faith-based shelters worthwhile. And what needs to be improved can be understood and worked on in order to make faith-based shelters more effective and more pleasant places for those seeking shelter. Fortunately, there are a great deal of solutions that can help faith-based shelters be a better place for those seeking shelter. This is the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you for viewing and listening. Please feel free to provide me feedback and give me any questions regarding my presentation. Thank you for listening.